Call your captain. In 90 seconds, this station enters controlled access. The handcuffs were fastened around Cameron Brooks's wrists as Officer Tyler Grayson led him through the rear hallway beneath fluorescent lights that hummed above the polished floor. Tyler laughed and kept walking. Nobody controls this station but us. Cameron glanced at the digital clock mounted over the processing desk. 1 minute and 26 seconds remained. Then you should watch the screens. 35 minutes earlier, Cameron had been standing near the employee parking lot in plain clothes, waiting for a confidential source connected to Operation Iron Ledger. The source was supposed to leave an encrypted storage device beneath the rear stairwell and walk away without making contact. The device contained original versions of altered incident reports, body camera files marked for early deletion, civil rights complaints alleging racial discrimination that had been closed without complete review, and access records connected to the leaked identity of a protected federal witness. Cameron could not openly identify himself as the lead Federal Bureau of Investigation agent because no one knew which employees inside the station were involved. He carried restricted federal identification, an official verification number, and a personnel code that could confirm his status without exposing the operation. Tyler arrived before the source completed the exchange. He ignored a white maintenance worker leaving the same restricted area and walked directly toward Cameron. "Why are you standing near police vehicles?" Cameron answered calmly and presented his restricted identification. Tyler looked at it for less than a second. This could have come from anywhere. "Call the verification number." "I am not calling a number you printed yourself." Cameron offered his personnel code and the name of Supervisory Special Agent Natalie Pierce. Tyler refused both, accused him of hiding something, and placed him in handcuffs. Cameron did not resist. Escalation could expose the source and give anyone inside the station time to destroy evidence. Now Tyler was unknowingly leading the man investigating the department through the center of the operations target. Cameron studied everything as they moved down the hallway. One ceiling camera had no active status light. A records clerk closed a computer window when she saw him. Sergeant Kevin Doyle entered a code into the server access panel beside the evidence corridor, then quickly stepped away. Detective Rachel Morgan stood near the processing desk and watched Cameron's eyes move across the room. He was not searching for an exit. He was identifying cameras, secured doors, workstations, and every employee who reacted before learning his name. Tyler positioned him beside an interview room and opened a booking report. Occupation. You have 3 lawful ways to verify that. Tyler typed hostile, evasive, and uncooperative into the report. Rachel leaned toward the screen. "He answered your question." Tyler ignored her. Cameron's voice had never risen. "Imagine standing in handcuffs while someone creates a false version of you before making a single call to confirm the truth." Cameron looked at Rachel. "Detective, use the authenticated station line and call the number on my identification." Tyler reached for the card. Rachel moved it away. Verification takes less time than writing accusations. Cameron checked the clock. 44 seconds remained. Across the room, the records clerk reopened the window she had closed and began moving files into an external transfer queue. Kevin looked toward the server panel again. Tyler continued typing. 20 seconds. A faint tone sounded from the secure watch beneath Cameron's sleeve. The scheduled safety code had not been sent. One monitor flickered. Rachel lifted the telephone. 10 seconds remained. Cameron looked directly at Tyler. "You still have time to correct this." Tyler smiled. "Nothing is going to happen." Cameron watched the clock reach 5 seconds as another screen briefly went dark. His expression did not change. The investigation is already inside. The final 5 seconds disappeared as Detective Rachel Morgan entered the federal verification number into the authenticated station telephone. Officer Tyler Grayson leaned across the processing desk. "Put that down. He is already being booked." Rachel kept the receiver in her hand. "He gave you restricted identification, a personnel code, and the name of a federal supervisor. You refused all 3. Tyler returned to the report and continued typing as though the words on the screen could still define the man standing beside him. Cameron Brooks watched the digital clock reach 0. A quiet tone sounded from the secure watch beneath his sleeve. At the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office, the missed safety code triggered an emergency alert connected to Operation Iron Ledger. Supervisory Special Agent Natalie Pierce activated the pre-authorized preservation process through county security and county information technology. One monitor froze, then another. The electronic doors sounded a warning chime before switching to controlled access. The records clerk stared at her screen as the external transfer queue stopped in the middle of processing 31 files. Sergeant Kevin Doyle removed his hand from the server panel, but the system had already recorded his access code, location, and commands. Every active workstation displayed the same message: Federal Preservation Process in effect. Do not delete, alter, transfer, or access protected records. Conversations ended. Keyboards went silent. Tyler looked around as though the station itself had turned against him. What did you do? Cameron remained still, his wrists secured and his voice calm. I missed a scheduled safety code. Federal authorities sent an emergency preservation request. County security and information technology activated the approved protocol. Captain Douglas Mercer stepped from his office and demanded to know why the building had entered controlled access. Tyler pointed toward Cameron. He caused this. Cameron looked at the frozen booking report. The words hostile, evasive, and uncooperative remained visible beside a timestamp proving they had been entered before any verification attempt. No, Cameron said. Your choices caused this. A federal dispatcher answered Rachel's call and requested her badge number, location, Cameron's personnel code, and the name printed on his restricted identification. Rachel provided each detail. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but no one in the processing area moved. Detective Morgan, the dispatcher said, Special Agent Cameron Brooks is the lead agent on an active federal investigation. Supervisory Special Agent Natalie Pierce is approaching with an evidence preservation team. Keep personnel away from protected systems and maintain controlled access. Rachel slowly lowered the receiver. His identity is confirmed. Tyler stared at Cameron. Special Agent? Cameron did not answer immediately. He was watching the records clerk step away from her terminal, and Kevin looked toward the server panel with growing fear. Douglas moved closer. What investigation? Cameron met his eyes. One involving altered incident reports, missing body camera footage, civil rights complaints closed without complete review, and unauthorized access to the identity of a protected witness. The station became completely silent. Imagine believing that Handcuffs had reduced a black man to someone without authority, only to learn that every screen around you was now preserving the truth he came to find. Headlights appeared through the glass entrance as 3 dark vehicles entered the secured lot. Rachel looked toward the ceiling camera without an active status light. You noticed everything when he brought you inside. Cameron nodded. The camera, the server panel, the transfer queue, the people who reacted before they knew my name. Tyler stepped closer. You could have told me who you were. Cameron looked down at the handcuffs, then back at the frozen report. I gave you 3 lawful ways to find out. A notification sounded at the entrance as county security confirmed the arriving federal team. Cameron turned to Rachel. Preserve your call record and body camera footage. Do not let anyone touch the evidence room, records terminal, or server access panel. She nodded. Outside, vehicle doors opened. Inside, Tyler watched the screens he had been told to watch, each one now holding a piece of the truth he had tried to replace. The secured entrance opened after Detective Rachel Morgan confirmed the arriving team through the authenticated station line. Supervisory Special Agent Natalie Pierce entered first with her federal credentials visible, followed by Special Agent Adrian Torres and 4 evidence preservation specialists carrying sealed equipment cases. They moved with controlled precision, directing county security to maintain restricted access while documenting every employee, workstation, and storage device inside the building. Natalie's attention settled immediately on Cameron Brooks, standing beside the interview room with his wrists still secured. Who placed the lead agent on Operation Iron Ledger in handcuffs? She asked. The question silenced the processing area. Officer Tyler Grayson looked toward Captain Douglas Mercer, but Douglas appeared just as unprepared as everyone else. Natalie stopped in front of Cameron. Agent Brooks, are you secure? Cameron nodded once. I am secure. The evidence may not be. Natalie authorized Rachel to remove the handcuffs. Cameron moved his hands once, then pointed toward Tyler's frozen booking screen. Preserve that draft before anything else. Tyler stepped forward. The report was not finished. Cameron met his eyes. That is why the timestamp matters. Adrian connected a forensic device to the protected network under the supervision of the County Information Technology Administrator. The report had been created before Tyler attempted any verification and described Cameron as hostile, evasive, and uncooperative. Rachel's body camera showed the opposite. Cameron had answered calmly, provided restricted identification, offered a personnel code, named his federal supervisor, and never raised his voice. Imagine watching the false story you started writing become permanent evidence before you had time to complete it. Natalie presented Douglas with the legal preservation authorization covering body camera files, internal communications, complaint records, evidence access histories, and documents connected to a protected federal witness. Operation Iron Ledger began after repeated changes were found in reports involving Black residents, she said. It expanded when a protected witness's identity was accessed through this station. Douglas stared at the authorization. No one told me my department was being investigated. Natalie's expression remained still. We did not know who could be trusted. Adrian reported that the records terminal had attempted to transfer 31 files after Cameron entered the building. The queue included 11 civil rights complaints alleging racial discrimination, 5 missing body camera cases, and an access record connected to the protected witness. Sergeant Kevin Doyle stood near the server panel, his face tense. Cameron turned toward him. Sergeant, step away from the terminal and keep your access card visible. Kevin complied. The records clerk raised her hands from the keyboard and said she had only followed instructions to archive old cases. Whose instructions? Cameron asked. Her eyes moved toward Kevin, then Douglas, and finally Tyler. No answer came. Rachel submitted her body camera recording and verification call as independent evidence. Natalie instructed every employee to remain at an assigned station while access logs were copied. The controlled access was not punishment. It was preservation. No one was threatened. No one was treated as guilty without evidence. That contrast was not lost on Tyler. He had denied Cameron the verification process now being extended to everyone else. Adrian opened the audit history and found that Tyler's account had reviewed several of the queued complaints during the previous month. One belonged to Malcolm Davis, a Black business owner whose camera footage disappeared after he requested outside review. Douglas turned toward Tyler. Why were you accessing closed complaints? Tyler claimed he had been preparing routine summaries. Cameron looked at the timestamps. Then the audit will show whether those summaries came before or after the evidence vanished. Tyler's confidence faded as the handcuffs were sealed inside an evidence container and his draft report was copied to a federal archive. Minutes earlier, he believed restraints proved Cameron had no authority. Now the restraints, the report, and every decision surrounding them belonged to an investigation Cameron was leading. Adrian Torres began copying the station's audit history, while the preservation team photographed each workstation and sealed the external storage ports. The transfer queue had started 32 seconds after Cameron Brooks entered the building, which meant someone inside had recognized the risk before his identity was publicly confirmed. Cameron stood beside Adrian and watched the timeline appear across the forensic monitor. The first command came from Sergeant Kevin Doyle's account. The second came from Officer Tyler Grayson's workstation. The third attempted to move the 31 files into a temporary archive scheduled for automatic deletion within 72 hours. Natalie Pierce turned toward Kevin. Did you authorize that transfer? Kevin hesitated. Tyler sometimes used my credentials when the system locked him out. Tyler immediately shook his head. He gave me access for routine work. Cameron looked at both men. Shared credentials do not erase responsibility. They multiply it. Adrian expanded the login history. Kevin's account had been used from Tyler's workstation on 6 evenings during the previous 3 months. Each session involved civil rights complaints, body camera retention records, or supervisory review notes. One session occurred the night Malcolm Davis requested an independent investigation. Rachel Morgan moved closer as Adrian opened Malcolm's file. The original incident report stated that Malcolm had provided valid identification, remained calm, and requested clarification about why officers were questioning customers outside his business. A later version removed those details and described him as confrontational. The associated body camera file had been marked for early deletion less than 2 hours after Malcolm submitted his complaint. Tyler folded his arms. Reports are revised all the time. Cameron answered without raising his voice. Corrections add truth. These revisions removed it. Adrian recovered additional drafts from the station's backup system. In one case, the words cooperative throughout the encounter had been changed to reluctantly compliant. In another, requested a supervisor had become challenged lawful authority. Every altered phrase moved the record in the same direction. It made the officer appear more reasonable and the black citizen appear more threatening. Imagine how easily a person's dignity can disappear when a few words are changed by someone wearing official authority. Captain Douglas Mercer insisted that he had never ordered anyone to alter reports. Natalie placed the preservation authorization on the desk between them. Then the audit should protect you. Adrian searched the administrative access history. Douglas's command profile had approved several late revisions and opened the protected witness file 2 days before the witness's identity appeared in an internal message. Douglas stared at the screen. Other supervisors had access to my office. Cameron turned toward him. Your account, your office, your approval history. Each claim will be examined, but none will be accepted without verification. County Information Technology suspended Douglas's administrative privileges under the preservation authorization, while the county's acting command official placed Tyler on administrative leave pending an independent civil rights investigation. Tyler looked toward Douglas for support, but Douglas no longer controlled the systems, the records, or the employees around him. Rachel escorted Tyler away from the workstation without placing him in restraints. Cameron noticed the contrast. The department was giving Tyler the process he had refused to give him. Adrian then recovered an internal message sent from Kevin's account 3 minutes before the transfer queue began. It contained only 6 words. Federal review may already be inside. Natalie looked at Cameron. Someone knew you were coming. Cameron studied the timestamp, then the disabled ceiling camera and the records clerk's frightened expression. Not exactly, he said. Someone knew the truth was getting close. The controlled access remained in place through the night while Adrian Torres and the preservation team created verified copies of every protected system. By 4:30 in the morning, the fluorescent lights had lost their harshness against the pale blue beginning to appear beyond the station windows. Cameron Brooks stood beside the evidence desk as each recovered file was assigned a digital signature, a timestamp, and an independent chain of custody. The first review confirmed 11 civil rights complaints involving black residents that had been closed without complete interviews. 5 body camera recordings had been marked for deletion before the county retention period ended. 3 incident reports had been revised after supervisors approved them, and every significant change removed information favorable to the citizen involved. Rachel Morgan watched Adrian restore the backup connected to Malcolm Davis. The footage showed Malcolm outside his business on a quiet afternoon, speaking calmly, providing valid identification, and asking why his customers were being questioned. Nothing in the recording supported the later claim that he had been confrontational. Rachel looked at the written report, then back at the video. The report describes a different person. Cameron answered, "That was the purpose." In a private interview room, Sergeant Kevin Doyle admitted that Tyler Grayson had borrowed his credentials repeatedly and that Captain Douglas Mercer had discouraged officers from escalating complaints that could attract outside attention. Kevin said he had convinced himself that silence was not participation. Natalie Pierce placed the internal message before him. Federal review may already be inside. "Who sent this?" she asked. Kevin lowered his eyes. Tyler typed it from my account after the records clerk told him someone had been asking about old body camera files. Cameron remained near the wall. "Did Tyler know I was a federal agent?" Kevin shook his head. "No. He thought you might be connected to Malcolm or one of the other complainants." The answer made the room quieter. Tyler had not detained Cameron because he recognized federal authority. He had detained him because he saw a black man near evidence he wanted left alone. Shortly before sunrise, county security ended the controlled access after Natalie confirmed that the records, workstations, evidence logs, and surveillance systems had been preserved. Employees were allowed to leave only after providing contact information and securing department devices for review. The county's acting command official formally continued Tyler's administrative leave and appointed an interim supervisor while Douglas remained without administrative access. Outside the station, another federal team received the encrypted storage device from Cameron's confidential source at a protected location. The device contained original reports, copied messages, and deletion requests that matched the data recovered inside the station. Two separate paths now led to the same truth. Tyler stood near the lobby under supervision, no longer wearing his duty equipment. He looked at Cameron as though one question had followed him through the entire night. "You knew this would happen when I brought you inside." Cameron shook his head. "I knew the preservation process would begin if I missed the safety code. I did not know what you would choose before it did." Tyler looked toward the sealed workstation where his unfinished report had become evidence. "You let me bring you in." Cameron's voice remained even. "I gave you 3 chances to verify me. You chose the version of the story that made you feel powerful." Natalie approached with confirmation that the source was safe and the device had been authenticated. Operation Iron Ledger no longer depended on one witness or one server. The proof existed inside the station and beyond it. As morning light entered through the front windows, Cameron watched the disabled ceiling camera being removed for examination. Tyler had believed darkness protected the record. He had never considered that every system around him was still keeping time. 9 weeks passed before Operation Iron Ledger reached the point where every recovered file could be compared with testimony, camera footage, access records, and the encrypted device delivered by Cameron Brooks's confidential source. The investigation moved slowly because Cameron refused to let urgency replace accuracy. Malcolm Davis sat across from him in a federal interview room and described the afternoon officers questioned customers outside his business. He remembered answering calmly, presenting valid documents, and asking for a supervisor. The original body. Camera footage confirmed every detail. The revised report did not. "They made me sound dangerous because I asked why I was being treated differently," Malcolm said. Cameron placed the restored report beside the altered version. "Now the record will show who changed the story." Investigators reopened cases involving a black public school teacher stopped while driving home, a black college student questioned near his own apartment, and a delivery driver accused of refusing instructions he had followed on camera. Adrian Torres compared each written report with audio, video, device records, and system timestamps. The pattern was consistent. Details showing cooperation disappeared. Requests for clarification became challenges to authority. Calm voices became aggressive behavior. Supervisory approvals appeared after the changes were made. Rachel Morgan gave a formal statement identifying officers who had raised concerns and supervisors who told them not to create problems for the department. She admitted that she had noticed Tyler Grayson applying different standards to black citizens long before Cameron entered the station. "I told myself I needed stronger proof," she said. Cameron looked at her. "What did waiting cost?" Rachel lowered her eyes. "It cost other people the benefit of being believed." Sergeant Kevin Doyle provided archived notes and explained how shared credentials allowed Tyler to access complaints without creating an obvious trail under his own account. Kevin admitted that he had warned Tyler once, then remained silent when the behavior continued. His cooperation helped investigators recover an internal message Tyler had sent several days before the station entered controlled access. The message instructed staff to clear vulnerable complaints before the expected federal review and identified Malcolm's missing camera file as a priority. Captain Douglas Mercer denied authorizing any destruction, but Adrian confirmed that Douglas's command profile had approved report revisions and opened the protected witness file 2 days before the identity appeared in an unauthorized message. Investigators could not yet prove who physically used the account, but they established that Douglas had failed to protect his credentials, failed to investigate irregular access, and repeatedly closed complaints without complete review. Imagine believing that leadership means protecting the institution, only to discover that every decision made to protect its reputation has become evidence against its integrity. Natalie Pierce authorized formal civil rights referrals and requested independent disciplinary proceedings for Tyler and Douglas. Additional supervisors received notices that their decisions would be reviewed. Cameron returned to the station with Rachel to identify the original location of the disabled ceiling camera. Employees watched quietly as Adrian removed the sealed device from evidence and demonstrated that its internal memory had preserved a partial access history. Tyler's identification number appeared in the maintenance request that had taken the camera offline. Rachel stared at the record. He did not expect the camera itself to remember. Cameron looked toward the processing desk where Tyler had written the false report. People who alter records usually think silence means nothing was recorded. Outside, Malcolm waited to sign the corrected statement that would replace the version that had followed him for more than a year. For the first time, the system was not asking him to prove his dignity. It was finally examining the people who had tried to erase it. 12 weeks after the station entered controlled access, the independent disciplinary hearing began inside the county administration building. Tyler Grayson arrived without his badge, duty equipment, or department identification. Captain Douglas Mercer entered through a separate door with legal counsel and sat at another table. Rachel Morgan, Kevin Doyle, county investigators, civilian oversight members, and representatives from the State Law Enforcement Certification Authority filled the room. Natalie Pierce appeared through a secure federal connection, while Cameron Brooks sat quietly near the rear wall. He had been asked to take the central seat, but he refused. "This hearing is not about what happened to one federal agent," he had said. "It is about every citizen whose truth was changed after the encounter ended." The panel began with Tyler's unfinished booking report. A clerk read the words hostile, evasive, and uncooperative aloud. Then Rachel's body camera recording played. Cameron's voice remained calm as he offered restricted identification, an official verification number, a federal personnel code, and the name of his supervisor. Tyler rejected every method. The room heard Cameron warn him 3 separate times that verification would correct the situation. The recording ended with Tyler continuing to type while the safety clock expired. The next evidence showed Malcolm Davis outside his business, complying with instructions and requesting clarification. Investigators placed the original report beside the altered version. One described a calm business owner. The other described a threat that never existed. Tyler argued that reports often required stronger language to explain an officer's concerns. Cameron was called forward. "Did the revisions make the reports more accurate?" a panel member asked. "No," Cameron answered. Every removed detail favored the officer. Every added phrase made the black citizen appear less reasonable. "That is not clarification. That is a pattern." Adrian Torres presented the access history, archived messages, camera deletion requests, and shared credential records. Tyler's workstation had opened multiple civil rights complaints. His identification number appeared on the maintenance request that disabled the hallway camera. His message directed employees to clear vulnerable complaints before federal review. Douglas's command profile approved altered reports and accessed the protected witness file before the identity leaked. Douglas claimed he had trusted subordinates and could not personally monitor every system. Natalie's voice came through the screen. "Leadership does not require knowing every keystroke. It requires responding when every warning points in the same direction." Rachel admitted that she had seen unequal treatment and remained silent too long. Kevin admitted sharing credentials and failing to report repeated misuse. Their testimony did not erase their failures, but it allowed the panel to understand how misconduct survived through fear, convenience, and loyalty without principle. Written statements from Malcolm, the black teacher, the college student, and the delivery driver were entered into the record. None requested revenge. They asked for accurate files, equal treatment, and assurance that future complaints would not disappear. After several hours, the panel returned its findings. Tyler had engaged in racially unequal enforcement, created materially inaccurate reports, interfered with a federal investigation, and participated in efforts to remove protected records. His employment was terminated, and his certification was referred for permanent revocation. Douglas was removed from command within the county department and referred for further civil rights review. Additional supervisors would face separate proceedings. Outside the building, a reporter asked Cameron whether the handcuffs had ended Tyler's career. Cameron looked toward Malcolm and the other citizens leaving with corrected records in their hands. "The handcuffs lasted a few minutes," he said. "His choices lasted for years." The weeks following the disciplinary hearing changed the station more deeply than the night of controlled access ever had. An interim command team opened every complaint connected to missing footage, disputed identification, altered wording, or reports approved through shared credentials. Rachel Morgan became the departmental liaison to the Independent Review Board, not because anyone believed her earlier silence had been harmless, but because she had finally chosen to document what others still wanted forgotten. Each morning, She compared body camera recordings with written narratives and found how easily official language could reshape a human being. A citizen who calmly requested clarification became argumentative. A driver who provided valid documents became reluctant to cooperate. A resident who asked for a supervisor became someone who challenged lawful authority. Imagine discovering that injustice does not always enter a record through a dramatic lie. Sometimes it arrives through one removed sentence, one sharpened adjective, or one detail quietly left behind. Malcolm Davis received formal notice that his complaint had been reopened, his original statement restored, and the missing footage recovered from the backup archive. He watched the recording beside Cameron Brooks inside a federal interview room. The video showed Malcolm standing outside his business, answering every question, protecting his customers, and remaining composed while officers treated his concern as defiance. When the screen went dark, Malcolm remained silent for several seconds. "I remembered what happened," he said. "But after reading their report for a year, I started wondering whether I had caused it." Cameron nodded. "That is what a false record can do. It does not only mislead strangers. It teaches the person harmed to question his own memory." Kevin Doyle entered a formal cooperation agreement and provided handwritten notes, archived messages, and the names of employees who had questioned the complaint closures. His decision came late, but it helped investigators recover additional records before the normal retention schedule removed them permanently. Douglas Mercer resigned from the department while the Civil Rights Review continued. His public statement accepted responsibility for failures of supervision, but investigators continued examining whether his administrative account had been used with his knowledge to access the protected witness file. Tyler Grayson appealed his termination and argued that the county had sacrificed him to protect senior officials. The appeal panel reviewed Rachel's body camera footage, Tyler's unfinished report, the verification record, internal messages, access logs, deletion requests, and the restored complaints. The termination was upheld. 3 months after the hearing, the State Law Enforcement Certification Authority suspended Tyler's certification pending final revocation proceedings. Cameron received the notice while reviewing proposed reforms with Natalie Pierce. The new system required independent backup of complaint footage, permanent alerts whenever reports were edited after submission, outside review of civil rights allegations, and written supervisory justification. Whenever an officer refused official identity verification, Natalie asked whether the reforms were enough. Cameron looked through the glass wall at investigators still sorting recovered records. "A policy can stop one method of hiding the truth," he said. "It cannot create courage in the people who see the truth being hidden." Rachel later addressed the department during a mandatory accountability briefing. She did not call herself brave. She admitted that she had noticed Tyler applying unequal standards and remained quiet because supervisors respected him. "Silence felt neutral," she said. It was not. Silence gave the false report more authority than the person it described. The station had reopened long ago, but its records were no longer trusted simply because an officer had written them. The controlled access had lasted one night. The reckoning had only begun. 8 months after the night of controlled access, the county adopted a permanent civil rights accountability plan built from the failures uncovered by Operation Iron Ledger. The announcement took place inside the same government chamber where Tyler Grayson's conduct had entered the public record. Rachel Morgan stood beside members of the Independent Oversight Board as deputy coordinator of the newly established Professional Standards Unit. Natalie Pierce represented the Federal Bureau of Investigation, while Cameron Brooks sat near the rear of the room and declined every request to place his name on the reforms. "This cannot become a policy that matters only because a federal agent was handcuffed," he had told the board. "It must protect the person whose name never reaches the news." Under the new system, body camera files connected to complaints would be copied automatically to an independent archive. Any report changed after submission would create a permanent alert identifying who made the revision, when it occurred, and why. Civil rights allegations could no longer be closed solely by an officer's chain of command, and any refusal to use an official identity verification process would require written supervisory review. Malcolm Davis attended the public meeting with the black teacher, the college student, the delivery driver, and other residents whose records had been corrected. Malcolm described watching the recovered footage from outside his business. "The camera remembered me more honestly than the report did," he said. "The system protected the accusation until someone finally protected the truth." No one interrupted. Imagine a room once used to defend official records becoming a place where the people harmed by those records were finally allowed to define what accountability meant. Several weeks later, the State Law Enforcement Certification Authority permanently revoked Tyler's certification. The final decision cited racially unequal enforcement, materially inaccurate reporting, interference with a federal investigation, and his documented role in efforts to remove protected complaint records. Douglas Mercer remained under civil rights review and was permanently barred from holding another command position within the county department. Kevin Doyle continued cooperating with investigators and helped identify additional files that had been marked for improper deletion. Rachel trained new officers to understand that professional loyalty did not require silence when a colleague violated public trust. She never described herself as courageous. She reminded them that she had waited too long. Cameron returned to the station on a cold morning near the beginning of winter to review the final evidence transfer with Natalie. The rear hallway looked ordinary beneath the same fluorescent lights. The camera above the interview room now displayed a bright green status signal. The server access panel required 2 independent credentials, and a public notice near the processing desk explained how citizens could request outside review of a complaint. Rachel met Cameron beside the digital clock that had once counted down his missed safety code. "Do you still think about those 90 seconds?" she asked. Cameron looked toward the interview room where Tyler had begun writing a false version of him before making a single verification call. "I think about the people who waited years for the system to count their minutes," he said. Then he handed Natalie the final signed transfer record and walked toward the exit. The handcuffs had never revealed his authority. The controlled access had never created the truth. Both had only exposed what the station had tried not to see. Tyler believed control meant deciding whose story entered the record. Justice arrived when the record finally belonged to the truth.